Well, since my last video, I've made quite a bit of progress on my 383 engine swap project that I'm doing. This is the old 350 that was pulled out, and I just pulled it out of the truck and set it here on this little cart. And then I've prepared the 383 for installation. I went ahead and bought a new starter. That's an AC Delco starter I got from Summit Racing. In one of the previous videos you've seen the installation of the dipstick that I did, and then also I've cleaned up and painted both engine brackets on both sides and installed them on the engine. And I don't know if there's any other progress I've made on this or not since the last video. Possibly maybe have installed that fitting there for the oil pressure sensor, and then also I've installed an oil filter and then rebuilt that adapter. Talked about that before. There's the other engine bracket there, and then also I got a new gauge sender for the water temperature installed. Now one thing on these brackets here, you notice there's an additional bracket behind there against the block, and that's on both sides. And we're going to look at that too. Both sides there, you see there's a hole there. Well, that accommodates these two braces that they have, which I've cleaned these up and painted them as well. Those guys go from the engine brackets there back to the inspection cover. This is a rigid cover that goes on. It's cast aluminum. It's held on by 6 bolts, and then on the back side here, those braces go to those 2 bolts there that you see. It strengthens up the connection between the engine and the transmission. Now I picked up some radiator hoses. These are just standard AC Delco radiator hoses. I got them from Summit as well. There's the lower, there's the upper. And then in this box I have a new oil cooler line. I didn't want to take a chance on my old ones. And that's the in, and then the out hose was on back order. Then I'll go ahead and open up this box here. I talked about before I was going to just install an AC bypass pulley for now until I get my engine running, and then I'm going to fix my AC. You've probably seen these are available anywhere. It's just a pulley. It takes the place of an AC compressor. I'm going to be installing that, and then at some later date I'll get around to fixing the air conditioner. I went ahead and pulled my cap off and my wiring harness that I made, and then I'm probably going to have to pull the distributor out just to make sure that I don't break it on something when I install the engine. Now I'm waiting for another thing that's kind of holding me up a little bit. The accessory drive kit that goes on the front here. I bought a brand new AC Delco or GM Performance Crate engine accessory kit, and it hasn't come in yet. But that comes with everything: the AC compressor, alternator, water pump, and power steering pump, and all the brackets to put it on. And what's nice about that particular one is there's 2 braces that come down, and they go behind the bolt on the headers on both sides instead of the braces that come down the front. And because I'm using a Vortec manifold, there's no place to bolt the factory braces to. Maybe I can show you that on the old engine. Yeah, on this crate, this is the engine that came out. Behind this stud here and this nut, and I believe it was on this side over here under that nut. There's a couple braces that go up to the accessory drive, and that wouldn't be compatible with the engine I built that has the Vortec manifold on it. So waiting on that, and that's holding me up just a little bit. Won't be here till later this month, but I should be able to get the engine on in the truck, and then get the headers and the exhaust system put on. If there's anything new over here, I did buy some clamps to replace these clamps here for the wiring harness. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm going to have to go back and use the flex plate that came off the 350, because the 4L80E transmission uses 6 equally spaced bolts. And the flex plate that I bought is for a dual pattern torque converter. So I'm going to have to use the old one, which should be fine because the 383 balances with the late flex plate and the counterweighted flex plate like you see here. So. And then under the flex plate here is just a skid plate that I pulled off so I could access my transmission a little better. Redid the wiring to it, and then also I'm going to have to add the wiring to the EZ TCU transmission controller, which I have here. I think that's going to work out pretty nice. That's a pretty neat kit. Over here is the harness for it. Take a quick look at the harness. There's an awful lot of wiring on it, but really you don't use that many of them. They're for different features. You can add paddle shift to it, and you can also add a performance switch for it that goes across one of these wires that come out, and you can select a more aggressive shift profile. That's the connector that goes into the TCU. It's a real small little controller. It's going to be really nice, and in a minute I'm going to show you on the truck where I'm going to install it. Here's the main harness that goes into the transmission here, and it's this one, and there's a speed input, there's a tach input, and then also there is a tach adapter that cleans up the signal from the negative side of the coil, which you got to use so it gets a clean input, RPM input from the engine. In another video I'm going to show these after I install it, but this is the dual fan from Permacool that I bought, and it's made for the truck, and I've test fit it. It looks really nice on there. I think it's going to do a great job. And then over here I pulled the battery out, and I purchased a couple of special side bolt extenders with nuts on it so I can add my fan power to this, and also I'm going to run my power to my transmission controller, and which I'll show that on another video as well. Now I pulled out the computer. This is the factory computer here. I pulled it out because I won't be using the fuel injection throttle body anymore, and then I've clipped out all the wiring that I don't need anymore. And if I decide to ever fuel inject this truck again, I'm going to use an aftermarket fuel injection kit, probably like a 4-barrel TBI from Holley or something like that. But for now I'm just putting on a Holley Model 4150 670 CFM 4-barrel carb. Here I've got my headers, and I've got my exhaust system, and I've got my mufflers, and then I'm going to be putting those on shortly. And then I went to Napa and bought a whole crap load of conduit so I could redo my wiring. And so we're going to take a look at the engine compartment. I'm trying to get it prepared, and it's looking pretty good. We'll walk out and take a look. And so this is all the parts that came off my truck. So I pulled out the AC condenser. I've cut the Y pipe off. I've removed the entire exhaust system. I had a Y pipe, a single exhaust with a catalytic converter, and then I had an aftermarket muffler on it with duals that go off the muffler. It sounded pretty decent, but I want a true dual exhaust on this with the headers, so I went with the Hooker system. I went ahead and pulled the grill off, and then fan shrouds. That's the little throttle body injection that was on it. And there was nothing wrong with the radiator, but I do have another brand new one, so I'm going to switch it over to the new radiator and then pull the fan off. This is all the leftover accessory drive kit, and AC compressor, air intake housing, so on, so forth. And so let's take a look at the engine compartment. And here's where I've taken off the grill. You can see my power steering cooler there. You can see my factory installed transmission cooler, and then inside here I've totally redone the wiring. I clipped out all of the computer wiring, and then and reduced it down to just the wiring that I need. Let's take a closer look. You can see the stub sticking out for the water heater core, and also the evaporator core, and then everything's inside of conduits, and this run neatly inside. Branches out to all the different things that I need. And this truck is in really pretty good shape, and the paint, if you notice how nice the paint looks under here, I just took a rag with some WD-40 and wiped off everything. You know, it has an accumulation of dust and it looks kind of white over time. For example, I haven't done that area down there yet, and you can see that. And I might put a little coat of paint maybe on some of the frame rails here that look a little rusty, and just you know, clean the whole thing up, make it look a little better. I've taken the shaft, front drive shaft, off of the transfer case so I can get in there and connect my computer up. Right in this area right here, right above the brake booster, is where I plan to put my transmission controller, and then I'll be running the wires down inside the conduits that they came in and the harness that they provided, and I'll be running it right down. Probably kind of follow this harness and then go down to the side of the transmission and plug in my transmission there. And so I have a few harnesses still left to make, which I'm going to wait until the engine's in. But in this particular harness here, I've got a wire for the choke heater on the carburetor. I've got a wire for a throttle kicker if I need it for the AC, and then a wire that goes over to the alternator, and the wire that goes over to the AC compressor and to the water temp sensor. So all that'll kind of go out across the engine. And then I redid the wiring that goes to my front axle. If you can see this harness that's coming up through the tube there, it goes behind the transmission dipstick and it Y's off, and then you see a big connector there that goes to the shifter for the transfer case, and it goes to some switches in there that engage the front axle. And I rewired that. It's going to go down through that tube. There's one wire there that's going to go to the starter solenoid, and then I'll run that conduit on down over, and it connects down here to the connector you see here. Zoom in a bit, right here, and then also to the motor here that engages the front axle. This truck originally came with a thermal actuator, which shorted out, and then when I went to the Chevrolet dealership to get a new one, they said, yeah, we don't use those anymore, they short out. And I've got a motorized one here now, which makes it shift into four-wheel drive much easier. Here's the connectors that go down to it. I just haven't, completed that part because I'm not sure how long they need to be. I might shorten them up a bit, put some tape around them, and then put that conduit over them. So all in all, this is turning out pretty good. Hopefully the next video you see, the engine will be installed, and maybe make a video about the exhaust system, and then we'll be on our way to getting it started up. Okay, thanks for watching.